Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! This is a podcast based on a blog of the same name because we are the originals. And our name is catchy, don't you think? My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out the blog at couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are still being published once per week in mini-seasons, kind of like The Walking Dead. So subscribe to the blog or the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and brand spanking new via Google Play to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows, including, but not limited to, Doctor Who, Downton Abbey, How to Get Away with Murder, Broadchurch, Marvel's Daredevil and Jessica Jones, Once Upon a Time, New Girl, The Vampire Diaries, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Gotham, Supernatural, Game of Thrones, and The X-Files from its inception through its revival. We've taken a look back at True Blood, Ally McBeal, Futurama, Desperate Housewives, and 6 Feet Under, and more episodes are in the works, including a revisit for Orange is the New Black, and new entries in our ongoing American Horror Story series. Plus, our DC Television Universe panel will shortly be covering Arrow Seasons 3 and 4 and The Flash Seasons 1 and 2. What's more, CPU has gone and will continue to go live. On August 8th, CPU joined forces with Grand Rapids, Michigan-based troupe No Outlet Improv for Comedy Outlet Mondays and was live at Dog Story Theater and streaming live on Facebook to talk Noit's Top 5 TV Comedy Inspirations. On September 26th, we'll be attending Com again, this time with our Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt panel to revisit Season 2, which will also be live streamed to our Facebook page. Surprises will be in store, so make sure you like us at our Facebook, our Twitter, follow us at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, and or our Pinterest at CPU Podcast, or subscribe to the blog, our YouTube channel, our iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Play. In the meantime, if you don't hear your show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we're always seeking new panelists, so if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any one of our outlets aforementioned. At the very least, stop by and leave a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback, just don't give us the type of feedback that one might get from a displeased Klaus. Please? Today, we're around the water cooler and reflecting upon Season 1, as well as recapping Seasons 2 and 3 of The Originals, which airs September through May on the CW. Season 1 aired from October 3, 2013 to May 13, 2014. Season 2 aired from October 6, 2014 to May 11, 2015. And the third season aired from October 8, 2015 to May 20, 2016. The Originals is a spin-off from The Vampire Diaries, which centers around the Michelson siblings, Klaus, played by Joseph Morgan, Elijah, played by Daniel Gillies, and Rebekah, played by Claire Holt. The backdoor pilot, which aired on April 25, 2013 during the Vampire Diaries regular season, also revealed that the werewolf Hayley, played by Phoebe Tonkin, is pregnant with Klaus's child and would therefore join the cast. The show begins with the original vampire siblings returning to the city of New Orleans for the first time since 1919. Having originally built the city, they had been forced to flee from their vengeful father, the vampire-hunting vampire Michael. In their absence, Klaus's protege, Marcel, played by Charles Michael Davis, took charge of the city. Klaus resolves that they must take down Marcel and get back the city that once belonged to them. While doing that, they must also protect their city from a war brewing between vampires, werewolves, and witches. Over time, new and old friendships are formed, love is in the air, death surrounds them, and most of all, they learn more about their own family past. I asked a small but robust panel of truly original but frequent CPU panelists to gather around the water cooler and discuss the state of this latest vampire show featuring another group of beautiful people with the most complicated and some very ancient situations. I think it's safe to say that my fellow panelists and I are as enthralled by this show, or at least certain members of it, as I am, and are ready to get started. So, as always, it should be noted that all of our panelists have viewed the entire series through Season 3 and may discuss sensitive plot points. For those of you who haven't watched any of the originals and plan to catch up at some point, listen at your own risk, as there are going to be major spoilers. At this time, I'm going to introduce the panel. Once again, the CPU loyal should know the drill. I'm going to ask our panelists to identify themselves by their first name only. Tell us how you came to watch the originals, what made you start watching, what made you keep watching. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you to identify your interest in the show based on the CPU standard character question that changes with each show we do. Are you ready, panel?
Yes. I'm ready.
All right. So, after you tell us who you are, tell us how you would rate your interest in the originals. Do you find the show and many of its characters noble as an overall homage to classic literature such as Shakespeare, Machiavelli, or Greek tragedy, but also the guiltiest of pleasures, and one you may even be slightly embarrassed to confess you love? However, you love it deeply and would do anything you could to defend its honor or to protect it, like Elijah Michelson. Though your morals lack because you've been the world's scourge for a millennium, you love this show and this family and would do anything to defend or to protect it. Consequences be damned. Even if your opinion of it can be ever conflicted, like the werewolf-vampire hybrid you are, like Klaus Michelson. Do you love the show and the family, but at the same time you feel it is a burden and a curse that prevents you from finding happier things, or maybe better shows in life? However, no matter what happens, you find you're always drawn back to it, like Rebekah Michelson. Do you reluctantly but tenuously enjoy the show and the family, tending to prefer some of the cast members and characters in it more than others, such as preferring Elijah to Klaus? Still, you can't seem to keep away because you always have hope that it will be better, like Hayley Marshall. You don't like the show or the family it portrays as much as you thought you did. On the one hand, it satisfies your love of vampires and or of being a vampire and gives you more than you dreamed was possible. On the other hand, watching this show and this family has presented too high a cost for you. Or you just watch it less for the family and more for the New Orleans backdrop because you love the city, like Marcel Gerard. Are you afraid this show and the members of the family it portrays are not living up to their true potential? There are parts you like and parts you don't like about it, and you fear being drawn to those parts you like because even they still need some serious work. Still, you can't help liking it, even loving it at times, like Camille O'Donnell. Or you don't like the show or the family it depicts because it threatens your very existence. Or you could care less about vampires, preferring witches instead. In fact, you probably would do better watching Charmed, like Davina Claire. Who would like to start?
I will.
Okay.
Charmed was good, by the way.
I like Charmed, but I'm just saying.
But anyway, no. Hi, my name is Jen.
Hi, Jen.
And I really don't remember how I came to watch this show. I know it was I was watching The Vampire Diaries, and I had heard the original family, whatever, was leaving Vampire Diaries, which I didn't really care for them as much when they were on that show. But then I had heard they got their own show, and I thought, well, I love vampires. I might as well, see what that's all about. And I really didn't think I was going to really like it and enjoy it as much as I do, because I really do. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. And I think I am probably a mix between Elijah and Klaus, but more Elijah.
Okay.
Maybe even a little bit of Hayley, but only that I prefer Elijah to Klaus.
Team Elijah.
I'm in love with that man.
Yes, right?
We'll talk about it.
Yes, we will talk about it. We'll be talking over and over about it. So yeah, and I keep watching it just because it seems like I'm waiting for it to have that lull point. Of course, it's only 3 seasons, so maybe it's going to get to that. I don't know, but so far it's just been better and better and better. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Jen.
Thank you.
Well, I am Allie.
Hi, Allie.
I'm Kylie's niece, as we all know. Well, I actually sort of started from the beginning of it. I was watching The Vampire Diaries. I don't remember. God, it had to be like the end of season 4 or something like that. And I heard that they were doing the spinoff, and I loved the Michelsons on The Vampire Diaries so much. Personally, they were like one of my favorite storylines. So I was like, yeah, let's go. And yeah, it was what kept me watching, I think, was it sort of I don't know, the characters I feel have so much complexity, and it's not as love and teeny boppery based. I know I'm a teen, so that's like what, but
she's an old soul.
as the Vampire Diaries. So it was nice and it was refreshing and I liked it. And I think for characters, I'm probably Rebekah, because I always come back to it, because I did end up like stopping and then rewatching sort of that situation. But I'm also Cammy, because like there's potential in so many of these characters and it needs to be brought out. So
all right.
So there you go.
Well, there we go. Fair enough. Welcome back, Allie.
Thank you.
And of course, I'm Kylie, if you didn't pick that up from the intro. And I started watching the originals because I watched the Vampire Diaries, and I agree with Allie. I loved the Michelsons when they were on the Vampire Diaries. I thought they added a lot of tension and a lot of sort of dramatic evil and villainy potential that really Damon didn't have anymore, because he was kind of serving as the villain for a long time. So then they had Elijah, and then, you know, there was the ever-present Klaus that we didn't meet, and then we met him. And then we found out there was a whole family of these guys, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating. Plus, it's an entirely new concept, I think, to vampire fiction, to introduce the idea that vampires are descended from one single family that existed, you know, a millennium ago and was created by witches. I think this is the first time we've really gotten that spin. And so, knowing and becoming aware that they were going to do the spin-off, I was sad they were leaving the Vampire Diaries, but all the more willing to follow them to the spin-off, because I thought, wow, there's a lot of story potential there. You know, there's 1,000 years worth of whatever they want to tell, and even though it might be introduced in a way that some people might say, oh, that's left field or whatever, there's 1,000 years of it. You can totally suspend disbelief, because we're never going to get through 1,000 years and however many seasons they do. They could go for seasons and seasons and seasons on that. So I thought, hey, plus I also am in love with Elijah so much, Team Elijah. I do like Klaus. I do like him. I'm not a hater of the Klaus. But I would marry Daniel Gillies if he wanted me and wasn't already married. He is the dreamiest man. And as such, because of my interest in the show, because of my interest in Elijah, because I love vampires, and also because it is complex, that's a very astute observation. I think this is vampire fiction for adults. Sometimes True Blood was the vampire fiction for adults, but in the pornographic sort of way. This is the vampire fiction for adults that, you know...
And I like mature, sophisticated.
Yes, there's more, there's intelligence, there's still some sexiness, but ultimately they keep their clothes on and, you know, for the most part, and the gore is reasonable as opposed to all the time. So I would be Elijah in this case. I find the show and many of its characters noble. I think it is an overall homage to classic literature. There's a lot of inspiration they're drawing on there, but it's also ultimately a guilty pleasure because it's vampire fiction.
Very true.
But I'm a big fan of vampire fiction. I'm not so guilty, and I'm not embarrassed to confess I love it. I just do. So welcome to the both of you. You might also recognize Jen and Allie's voices from the Vampire Diaries panel, among others. So everybody is very familiar. Today we're going to be talking about 3 seasons, because the last time CPU covered this, I wrote one blog entry shortly after the pilot aired and shared my observations, and then we kind of went into a hiatus, and now we're coming back strong and podcasty. So it's time to revisit the original. So we're going to talk through season 1, but we're going to concentrate heavily on seasons 2 and 3 as well, since so much has happened. So first, we're going to talk about season 1. The Michelsons return to NOLA and start their spin-off. I think we've sensed the picking aside here. There's Jen on Team Elijah.
I'm the minority.
Allie is Team Klaus, and your moderator is Team Elijah. You don't have to be a minority. The brothers still love each other deeply.
Sort of. Sometimes.
No, they love each other.
They do.
They just also hate each other sometimes.
You know,
hate is the opposite of love.
They would do anything for each other, but at the same time, it's like, can you just stop killing people for like 1 minute sort of situation.
But yet you like Klaus, and he's the one most...
I do. Very true.
Most likely to do that. So let's talk about it. We just mentioned that the Michelsons came from the Vampire Diaries, but we introduced a bunch of new characters, including Hayley, Marcel, Cammy, and Davina. What do you think of these characters, and what do you think of New Orleans and the whole backdrop of the show?
I love it all. I do. I love all four of those characters.
Right to the point.
Except for Cammy later on, which we'll get to. But, yeah, I like them. I love Davina.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm the
Davina
minority.
as well. Oh, yay!
Why, you don't like her?
I'm not a big fan. She grew on me eventually.
It's the actress.
It's
it really
the actress.
Is. Yeah. Danielle Campbell, she has her strong suits, I think, but for the most part, she kind of does struggle, especially with like really emotional scenes.
Yes.
Where she's like really angry or something.
Yeah,
she just doesn't convey it well. The character itself is spectacular. I think she brought a lot to the show. I mean, she's young. She's a strong female character. She deserved better.
We're not there yet.
I'm sorry.
Season 1.
Well, season 1, I will say, I liked her better, loved her in season 1. When she was coming about the whole
when she was
harvesting
in the attic,
girls' net, she had all that power. And then later, I do kind of like her less. But
okay.
I don't know if it's just, I mean, it's not the actress, I don't think, maybe, but I just think that the characters gets a little bit less interesting, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I definitely do agree in the harvest sense because she was like this very, like, compared to Klaus and everyone's mom, like, she was incredibly powerful, and she had this, like, really kind of dark story, but she was also really positive in some senses, so, like, yeah, she was definitely, I mean, she had a uniqueness to her in season 1 that sort of faded out after she lost that power and that sort of thing.
I think for me, all of those 4 supporting characters had to grow on me a little bit. I didn't like any of them instantly. Hayley came first. I liked her quickly. I had seen Phoebe Tonkin on The Secret Circle, so it was a little bit weird to adjust my brain.
That's right. She did. I knew she looked so familiar.
Yeah.
That's where
she's from. They canceled that show after one season and then tried to shuffle all the actors into their different shows.
She also played a mermaid on H2O.
Oh, yeah.
With Claire Holt.
Okay. So I like her quite a bit now. Marcel, I think when they started to flesh out his history, he got very, very interesting, and certainly his relationship to Klaus is very, very interesting. But when we first met Marcel, he was kind of Davina's caretaker, if you will, even though she was in Kieran's church. Whatever. And it just took me a while, and for me, I do think it's the actress. I liked the concept of the character, but every time she came on screen, it was like,
yeah.
This is just a little too, this is like pulling away from the adult portion of the story a little bit, and I get why they did that, because obviously it will have a teen following that also comes from the Vampire Diaries, and they did eventually kind of smarten up her story a little bit, but when we first met her, she was just this petulant child with a lot of power, and that kind of annoyed me. And I was like, why would she even be here, and why would the Michelsons even care? But they did a good job fleshing out her story. Camille I liked a lot too at first.
I did too at first.
She added a nice balance to all of the hothead vampires on the show, with the exception of Elijah, the only cool one. But then she's had her own traumas too, which we'll talk about. But I did like her a lot. Like at first, her being the bartender, kind of listening to all of this craziness. But then as they fleshed her out a little bit more, she got crazy, and I don't know. I think the actress did an admirable job with her.
I think so. I enjoyed the relationship between her and Klaus.
Yes.
That constant sexual kind of romantic tension.
Yes.
It was
small.
But then when what happens later on, you're like, now what?
I know, right?
It was pretty reminiscent of Damon and Elena for me, just because it was like she's this very pure, like wholesome human, and she's kind of like swaying towards this kind of really just bad person with a really dark history. So yeah, I don't know, it's surprising that you say you enjoyed Cammy, because for the first like half of that season, I just didn't like. I could sense her potential, like in that she had a lot to bring, but she was like that Donovan from the Vampire Diaries. She was like the
she wasn't that bad.
She was
she was like the a token human. Like, she just kind of, and then she was being compelled, and then they reversed that, and then
they did do that a lot.
That got tedious.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to talk about the story points, which I don't think serviced her character very well, but I agree with Jen. For me, I think the reason why Cammy was interesting was because she had this tension with Marcel, and then she had this tension with Klaus. And while I can see the parallel between Elena and Damon and Klaus and Cammy, Klaus and Damon are two totally different vampires.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just the, like, to put their characters in a box, that's how it kind of, like, reflects for me, is this, like, good but bad. Like,
sure. But Klaus is so much more complex and so much more dangerous.
True. He really is.
And I think even she sensed that always, and that's why she was so... Her conflict with that was very... I mean, she knew she was falling for the bad boy. Like, she said that multiple times when she got her faculties back from the compulsion. It was like, I cannot like this guy. He's the most horrible vampire in the history of the universe. This is not good. But there was something deeper there, and that, you know, a lot of, I think, the originals... The story projection that they're on and have been on since season 1 is, can they redeem Klaus? It's not even a question of will he get it. It's is it even possible at this point, because he's had 1,000 years of being so horrible.
Yeah.
And she kind of served that reflection, but as you say, this now what will become important. But let's focus on season 1, because you know, she was still Cammy in season 1.
Yep. The show for me, like you said, it just really gets down to, like, it has more depth as opposed to the Vampire Diaries, and I think that's why I do prefer it, which I think most people prefer it, at least from what I've heard. It's just the characters just, like, they get right down to the core of them, which is, writing wise, I like a lot.
I think I definitely like the originals better now. I don't think in season 1 I could say that I liked the originals better than the Vampire Diaries. I think they were on an even playing field. Yeah. Because the Vampire Diaries were still running pretty strong back then, which was season 5. Season 5 was a lower point for them, but it was still the Vampire Diaries, and it was still driving on that engine. Yeah. Whereas the originals, I feel, season 1 took some time to find its groove.
Yeah, there was a lot of building up to something big. It felt like the whole season looked like just this expansion of, like, suspense.
Well, yeah, they had to lay all of the game pieces on the board. Yeah. And in this show, more than in the other show, there are so many more game pieces. It isn't just the Michaelsons, it's New Orleans, and it's the fact that New Orleans is populated by these different supernatural groups that have all come and converged on it. So, for some reason, they only live here in this concentration. So, there was a lot of stage setting in season 1, almost to a fault, because there was a lot of exposition and explanation and flashbacks, and that was a little bit boring.
A lot of flashbacks.
But then it's served as a really good platform for the future seasons, so we'll talk about that. So the first season was ultimately about the siblings and kind of resetting them in this backdrop of New Orleans and learning a little bit more. We already knew about some of their twisty family politics from the Vampire Diaries, even though they had killed 2 of their brothers and their parents multiple times. We'll get to that. But it was about Klaus versus Elijah versus Rebekah. And it was also about introducing these factions, vampires versus witches versus werewolves. What do you think about all that stuff?
I like the factions. I think it's really, like, I feel like the Vampire Diaries touched very briefly on it, but they didn't go into so much depth as having these, like, very united places like the Bayou or the cemetery or the Lacey or whatever it was. And then the vampires, of course, with Marcel reigning king at first anyway, which I liked his character a lot at first. He was very, like, confident, and I thought that it was just really good.
I like it. I thought they did a good job as showing pretty much equal, like, amounts of it, like not too much witches, not too much werewolves, you know, because it is supposed to be more about the vampire side, and we, you know, but I thought they did a good job of weighing that, balancing that all out.
Pretty much agree with that. I do think the werewolf storyline at the end of the season got a little bit too drawn out.
Yeah, for me, I think as the seasons went on, the politics of the factions did get a little bit, like, a lot, but I still enjoyed it at the same time. I don't know, it was weird.
So a couple of the big things that starts to happen that we learn, and really these different factions are backdrops for our main characters, because all of the main characters represent some of the factions. The Michaelsons, of course, are the vampire side with Marcel. You've got the witches represented by Davina. You've got the werewolves represented by Hayley. And then Cammy, like you said, is the token human. And of course, in the first season, there was the priest, Kieran, who was her uncle. So we learn a lot of facts and backstories, and one of the biggest things that they delve into is Marcel's backstory, because of course he was a young slave boy that Klaus kind of took in and
adopted,
raised,
yeah,
and then eventually sired. So, and then we also learn in that season that Marcel and Rebekah had a love affair for the ages. What do we think about Marcel and his relationship with the family?
I really like his relationship with Klaus. I think sort of showing flashbacks to him, like when they first meet and Marcel's a boy, and then all the way to season 3 to where they are now, just that fall. I think creatively, I liked it a lot, and it shows just how much can happen in a vampire's lifetime.
Which is very long.
Which is forever, so, and I like that a lot. With Rebekah, I don't know, I do like them together, but they just don't really, they focused on it a lot in the first season, and then it kind of faded out, and it was
that's because Claire Holt left the show.
Yeah,
Which I was not
sad
happy
me.
about.
I know.
You were not happy about it?
No, I liked her.
Same. I was so sad that she just kind of, like, went away. Like, I was happy because her character was happy. Like, she was off with hope, and further on in the podcast, but
it's funny because when they first introduced the Michaelsons on the Vampire Diaries, I could not stand Rebekah.
Oh, I didn't like her on there.
Never.
She was kind of just like the
like
bratty sister, which I think was
Yeah.
how she was supposed to come off, but at the same time, it's like, could she have like a little bit more like depth, maybe?
Exactly.
But yeah, she definitely evolved with that just yearning to be human. Like, I really liked that because we hadn't really seen that before so much, so...
Well, and that's why I like the Marcel backstory with her. I mean, I do think, again, they meditated on the love affair a little too long.
Yeah.
And Klaus's jealousy, as always, was misplaced because he's always jealous or angry at someone. And Rebekah being his favorite sibling. But I think the Marcel backstory did give her some depth, and it showed her those human aspects and why that Marcel was so important to her, and how she kind of related to the world around her. So I grew to actually like Rebekah a lot, and I'm very happy that they're still drawing the actress back to the show. I wish she would become a regular again, which we'll get to in a second. But as you noted, she left the show to go do other projects, and her character was released by Klaus to go seek her fame and fortune, and please don't ever come back. But at the same time, it just, I love it when it's the whole family, or as much of the family as possible.
With Rebekah, I think with that same need to be human, one of the saddest scenes for me from the Vampire Diaries is when she's standing like in front of a mirror and they're going to some dance because it's the Vampire Diaries.
There's always a party.
Very true. And she's wearing this dress and she's like, oh, like essentially it's just her being excited to be normal and do a human teen kind of thing. And Elena stabs her legitimately in the back. And that's just, I think it's really representative of her character. Like, that's just her. Like, it's either Klaus putting her in a coffin or something happens where she has to run from a thing she loves because of her parents. So, yeah.
I think she gets used a lot.
Yes.
Not
She really
mistreated,
does.
but just kind of...
I'd say
It's like a doormat.
Yeah.
Kind of like walked on. Like,
She
she's
is
easy
walked
to,
on.
Yeah.
you know. But I love her. I think that Marcel, getting back to him and Klaus, I didn't really care for Klaus in the Vampire Diaries, but with the originals, when they started doing all the backstory of Marcel, it kind of gave Klaus a more softer side and showing him as a parent, kind of, and that's what I really liked. He still had that meanness and that edge and stuff, but there was this other side that he didn't like to have exposed too much, you know, and I guess that's when I started to really... Yeah, that's what I
And
really
from
started liking.
Marcel, too, I think, because we see him as this, slave boy. I
Yeah.
mean, that's that pretty much, and then he comes and you see him in the pilot, and he's again like very confident. He's the king, so to see that relationship and the contrast is neat.
Yes, so then you've mentioned, good segue, this whole King of New Orleans situation. So, in some ways Marcel is the apprentice who has now, past the master, or whatever the line from Star Wars is. You were once the student, I was once the student, now I am the master. That's what I meant. And Marcel, we find out that Marcel is the one who called Michael to town to drive away the Michelsons, the children, so that he could take over. And then we've got this whole vying for power. Were you Team Marcel or Team Klaus at that point?
I was kind of torn between the two. One episode I was definitely Klaus, and the next episode I was definitely Marcel, and in the end is Klaus.
Yes, of course.
I think I liked Marcel's aspect of it because he had a very systematic way of handling the vampires and the werewolves. Not that he handled the werewolves very well because he was mean to them, but
which always strikes me. That's one of the conflicts of his character that I think is very fascinating, because he's the hybrid of the five. If you don't already know, Klaus is the product of an affair that Esther, their mother, had with a werewolf way back in the day, and that's why his father, Michael, hates him so much, and why Michael chases all of his children across the globe and back. It's basically to get Klaus. The others are just, fodder because they protected Klaus. And he seems, even though Michael is his father, and he has some major daddy issues, understandably, even though Michael is the father that he knows, whenever he's confronted with his werewolf heritage, he just almost ignores it or dismisses it, or really mistreats that side of him and the members of that population. I don't know what you think about that, but...
Yeah, I think it brings a lot to his character. It sort of makes you have this sympathy for him amongst all this, murdering, all the time. But I think it's interesting.
Which is funny because, wasn't it, and when they were in the Vampire Diaries, he was trying to make hybrids?
Yes.
That's very
That's
true.
how Tyler was a hybrid for a while.
Yeah. So then once they start their own show, it's like he's anti... almost.
Yeah, which it's nice. Yeah, it's nice to see that sway back and forth between who he knows he is, his blood basically, and what he wants to be at the same time. But yeah, I forgot about the siring and the doppelganger business. In the
Maybe it was the fact that all his hybrids ended up dying.
Well, he killed them.
Yeah, he ended up killed them.
He did. That's right. He did kill them. I knew he just died. I couldn't remember how. It was so long ago.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's just it. Klaus is a flip-flopper.
Yeah, he definitely,
in a big way.
Definitely is.
Team Elijah.
He's the one consistent.
He is. He is always Elijah. Unless when somebody's trying to take him over magically or something. That's a different story.
But I think it's what brings... yes, but for Klaus too, I think it's what brings the fascination with his character.
Always at conflict.
Yes.
So speaking of Klaus and the werewolves, we get introduced to Hayley because we learn that Klaus and Hayley had this one-night stand. However that happened, I'm not even still sure. And she magically got pregnant.
It was the werewolf because they were both... He had his hybrid side and she had a werewolf side, and thus a child.
That's not satisfactory.
But isn't there something magical about this baby? Don't they have
that's the inference, but I don't know that they've ever actually explained the baby.
They haven't, I don't think.
Hope is what turned Hayley into a hybrid because of the
That's true. That's not until season 2, though.
Very true.
Or at that very end of this season.
Yeah.
So the question is, how does the baby even get made?
Which no one explains that in all of vampire fiction, every time, even in...
They explained it in Van Helsing, the movie, but it wasn't a very good explanation, but they did give one.
Wasn't Hayley in the Vampire Diaries too?
She was.
Didn't her and Klaus have a thing during that show?
She was in the backdoor pilot.
She was friends with
Tyler. Oh, that's what...
She was friends with Tyler.
Yeah, she was friends with Tyler, that's right.
I think she was trying to show Tyler sort of the werewolf side of just his world, I guess, and somehow she got just caught up in some madness.
Yeah.
But
that's right.
So I hope that that's something that they explore. We've explored that this baby is special, and that it is, or she now, because she becomes Hope, is probably a hybrid, or at least vampiric in one
And
sense.
a witch, too. I think they said she would have witch blood because of
Esther.
Esther,
Yeah, all of the original children would be witches if they had turned into vampires.
Right.
That's further on.
That's
but
further
yeah.
That's further on.
We'll get to that. We found that out in season 2. So, what do we think about this whole... Tell me about how you feel about hope. The whole hope thing.
I like it.
Sure.
I give my full support.
Oh, right.
When I latch onto a character, they have to be this powerful thing, whatever. And so I'm just hoping that this baby is going to be like an ultra hybrid magical creature somehow. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just have hopes that hope is going to be like the saving grace of the family and bringing them together, maybe, because... Yeah, I won't go into that because
I know. This is what happens when we do these multi-season ones.
It's so hard.
I know.
The last one I watched was season 3, but yeah, I'm kind of hoping that will kind of bring the family more together and give them that bond that they're kind of lacking a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, just
fight against. I guess they're constantly fighting.
For me, I didn't like it at first. I mean, Hayley, I was on the fence about. She grew on me tremendously. I think again it was Baby Tonkin, like the way she conveyed her character wasn't the best. But then it sort of became her character, like that was how she is, so I think that's why she grew on me. But the whole, like, I was just, for example, but I was just turned off by Twilight from the whole, like, baby thing.
Okay.
Because I, like, had a traumatic experience just, like, watching those movies generally. So
I have stayed away from sparkling vampires myself.
It was a mess. So
I believe in bloody ones, not sparkling ones. Proceed.
So now having this magical baby, I was like, oh no, because it could have been just sort of the same thing. But it wasn't. I was very pleasantly surprised. I think Hope, her name is fitting. She did bring the family together in a lot of ways, and she gave Klaus a reason to, more so than just becoming king. He was now indebted to this child, and that was sort of his siblings' message the whole first season, because they're like, man, you gotta, like, lock it up. Like, you have a kid coming. Like, so, yeah, I think it grew on me a lot, so.
I think it's very interesting, and I do like Hayley a lot. I think, especially as the seasons progress, not so much in season 1, but I think she also serves as a mirror for this family. I think that's ultimately what the supporting characters do.
Yeah.
Is serve as mirrors to the Michaelsons and show them, where they have screwed up and where they have done right. And Davina's, of course, more an enemy type of mirror, because they never really find a good equilibrium.
Yeah.
A little bit kind of sort of
they help
as
each
the
other
seasons
here and
progress
there.
because of a sibling we'll get to in a minute, but in the beginning she was more an enemy. Marcel, of course, is more of a family type of mirror. Cammie is the townsperson kind of mirror, and then Hayley is the I'm the supernatural element kind of mirror for you. That's not a vampire. So
no, they definitely had a good balance. I think the way they constructed it, like, strategically was really well done.
Now, in season 1, we also met Jackson and learned about the Crescent Wolves. So what did you think about Jackson? Who also appeared on True Blood, by the way.
Yes.
I was just really indifferent. Like, I don't know. I liked him in season 2, but yeah, in season 1 I was just kind of like, okay, werewolves, which they weren't my favorite to begin with. Again, this show, it just grew on me, like that just seems to be a theme of the show. But yeah, I just didn't really have an opinion on him at first.
But he was betrothed to
That's
her.
true.
They were supposed to get married, and that only mattered because her and Elijah had a little something going from the very beginning. Talk about sexual tension. Oh my God.
Which I love.
I love that.
I do too.
They're like, because he's the repressed one.
Yeah.
So they're like,
yes.
What's he going to do?
I like Jackson. I like that character, but not with Hayley. I like Hayley with Elijah.
Yes.
But I do like the Jackson character, but yeah.
The
I do
scene
too.
in
I
the
like him.
pool with, like, Elijah and Hayley, and she's, like, having a breakdown because of the witches, and he's like, I got you, like, it's okay, like that. Yeah.
Jackson would have been good with Rebekah.
Yeah, that's a good
I just
one.
thought of that. Whoa! That would have been a good match.
That would have been a good
know.
match. Or with Cammy.
Or with Cammy,
with
yeah.
Cammy, too.
I think more Rebekah. That's really good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because
Let's
she
wait
wants
for
someone
the
to kind of take
writers.
care of her, and he's more than willing to take care of somebody.
Yeah, that's a good contrast of him, too, is he's very, like, he's sort of the pure, he's like Cammy, because he has that sort of pure motive that a lot of the characters don't really have on the show, so, yeah.
And I think that's kind of, when you're hitting something, and that also goes to Matt on the Vampire Diaries. It's interesting that we find the pure, quote-unquote, pure motive people to be the least interesting. And by we, I mean you, Allie.
I love just the complexity of being villainous. It's just great.
But Jackson, he wasn't totally innocent when he first came on the scene.
No, absolutely
he had a
not.
lot of checker. Because you find out that the werewolves in this town particularly have been persecuted for a long time. That's why we get into this whole werewolf striking back motif at the end of season 1, because the vampires and the witches have been duking it out the most, and the werewolves are kind of the collective collateral damage of it all, and Jackson becomes their spokesperson.
That's very true. And
I love this actor because I loved him on True
great.
Blood. Yes, I liked him. I thought, what do you call that? Something of riches.
a rags to riches?
No, like having riches, like something of riches, choice of riches. I don't know. The point is,
he's like, he could be king, like.
No, because Hayley has these 2 awesome men
Oh.
who totally love her.
Yeah, that's
and they're hot. And they want to take care of her, and she's all like, I can take care of myself. And then they let her. It's amazing.
I like that quality of her character, though, because I think the show, the writers specifically, do a really good job of portraying female characters as they should be portrayed, which I'll get into further.
Fair enough.
As it continues. But for season 1, that was my, sort of consensus.
So we have the werewolves storyline. We also get to meet Josh, who was sired by Klaus and became Davina's BFF.
He's so precious.
And he is precious. He's a wonderful... He's a vampire with a heart.
Yeah,
man.
he's the comedic relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
Becomes Marcel's kind of lieutenant or number 1 protege, if you will. So we have that kind of storyline. We have Klaus kind of trying to use all the different factions to position himself as king because he's kind of Roman Emperor-esque like that. And then we also had that weird storyline with the long-lost coven and the witch named Genevieve, who had that relationship with Klaus when they were back in New Orleans the first time. What did we think about that storyline?
I feel like I could have done without it.
Yeah, I can't
it
really
just
even...
felt like it just popped out. I don't know. I didn't really think it added anything to the show.
Yeah. I didn't either. I did not like her.
Oh, I didn't like her either.
Not just because she was playing a villain, but because it was like, okay, we already have sort of the chaos with the witches that are supposed to be alive and not coming back from the dead after the post-harvest, because obviously they harvest some of the girls, they never manage to harvest Davina, and that throws them all into chaos because this harvest was supposed to be the anchor of their power. So we had kind of that brewing on. We had the werewolves getting ready to declare some kind of war with that Francesca woman, and then we have this witches storyline with her fiddling around with Klaus and Rebekah and making them all crazy.
Yeah.
And I did not like her.
No, I can't really even remember it. That's kind of like how much
That's
it
good stallions, doesn't it?
It does. It's like they could have just done without it. It would have.
I think the only thing I remember from Genevieve is flashbacks to Rebekah in a hospital during the Black Plague, I think.
Yeah.
The bubonic plague. And that I liked because I like flashbacks, but aside from that, yeah, she was just kind of there.
I just think it was too much in a season that was already trying to set the stage. And you're right, it never went anywhere. It didn't ultimately give them any conflict. It didn't go into any other season. It didn't work.
No. Died, didn't she?
She died.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, again. Oh, sorry. Yeah, but
there's a lot of resurrection in this show.
There really is.
Which you can suspend disbelief on because there's a lot of magic in the show, but really...
Like, how many times...
What are the rules, man?
There are no rules.
There are no rules.
Which, this is an irrelevant question, but is Michael's name Michael Michelson?
That is correct.
Oh my god.
Yes.
That's so great.
And Michelson, because way back in the day, you were son of your father. And so that's where their last name comes from. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any last names. So they are son of Michael or Michelson.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that makes him Michael Michelson.
Incredible. Really original. I love it.
Who's played by...
Sebastian Stan.
Is that his last name?
Yeah, I think. Because
Not
he was
Rocher?
in,
I don't know, but he's a great actor.
he was in Supernatural. He played...
Oh, yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He was in Supernatural.
I think he's a good actor.
He is a good actor.
I think
and
it's
I enjoy
Sebastian
when he's
Stan.
there.
No.
I think it's Sebastian Rocher.
Oh my god, Sebastian Stan is that one guy from... It's Sebastian Rocher, duh.
Right?
I'm so sorry. Okay.
Yes, he does a very good job. I love it whenever they resurrect him, and he comes back a lot. In fact, segue. So we're going to talk about, we're going to move now into season 2, but I want to so at the end of season 1, kind of the cliffhanger of that season, the werewolves make their play, they kind of take over everybody, they kill a bunch of vampires, the witches are kind of, Davina practically becomes nuclear, they have to kind of anchor her power or she'll blow up or something. And of course, Hayley has hope, and in the process is sired into a vampire hybrid because she was initially a werewolf. And that kind of segues us into season 2. Now, season 2, I am dubbing the Family Rises from the Dead season because all of the Michelsons make an appearance in one way or another. So let's talk about that season transition, and then tell me your general thoughts about season 2.
I like it.
Jen's always like, I like it.
I'm trying to remember. I get season to season mixed up, but...
I liked Rebekah, her going off and really just living a human life, and then coming back and seeing how much she's changed. You can just really see her vibe is just really relaxed, which is nice. She had a spa day with Hope, so I liked that.
I think that's season 2 is when I really started liking Klaus a lot more and loving Elijah even more.
I mean, what's there not to love, Of course, Elijah in this, so just to kind of mention my thoughts. First of all, I thought the season transition was really awkward, but for having the baby, because I think the witches and the werewolves and all the stuff that was kind of converging, because we also had Elijah's weird witch lover kind of happen in those last few episodes of season 1. Her name was Sabine.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember her?
He has so many. And plus, with Catherine from the Vampire Diaries, it just gets all over the place.
Yes, and there was just a lot going on. So I felt like they very quickly tried to shed some of these superfluous storylines, which writers, that was a good move. Because what they focused on in season 2 and eventually in season 3, I think was awesome.
Yes, I agree.
So we have hope. And yes, the first thing that sort of happens is Marcel, who has been railing against Klaus all season 1, particularly for breaking him and Rebekah up, is now ready to join forces with Klaus because of the werewolf situation, right? Then we have these witches coming back to life, not the least of which includes Esther Michelson, the matriarch of the Michelsons, but she's back in a different body. And so starts the theme of season 2.
Body jumping.
Body jumping. What did we think about that?
I liked it.
Jen didn't say I like it right away.
I liked it for a little. To me, it got a little bit much. Yeah, they kept so much in the end. In the end, I didn't like it so much.
Their mom, for me, okay, I get it, sort of thing. I just didn't, she turned her kids because she wanted to save them.
Yes.
That's correct. Okay. So here's the thing. You did that. They're alive now. They're saved. But
forever.
Forever.
Especially Klaus.
Yeah. But, that's your fault. And so...
That's your fault, yo.
Yeah, and so now she's like, oh no, I have to like have them repent for all these bad things they've done, which I understand. Like they need to sort of sift through their torment, but she's going about it the wrong way because it's like, again, it's your fault you did this. And so I guess that's just sort of my like logical thinking as opposed to like a creative aspect of writing, but yeah.
It actually starts to set up, so one of the things that I most love about the originals across all the seasons is exploring this family and how they relate to each other and kind of how the writers are drawing sort of the genetic details between all of them. Because if you think about it, none of the actors really look a lot alike. There's sort of kind of some similarities, but they barely look like they're a family. Especially Elijah. Daniel Gillies does not look like any of the other ones.
Anybody.
All the other ones are at least some shade of blonde. He's tall and dark and handsome, which we're okay with. But so it's kind of, I love how they're kind of compensating for that by drawing these parallels. And so one of the big parallels is Esther is a flip-flopper too.
Yeah,
she's the
like
one
Klaus.
Has too much power at her disposal, just like Klaus, uses that power to, quote, save her family from whatever, who knows what, just to make them safe, but does so by doing some very dark magic to turn them into these things that exist forever. And then the byproduct of this existence is that they have to take blood to survive. And I think she also has an interesting parallel to Finn, who we once knew to be, we'll get to that in a second, but who we knew to be the once oldest Michelson child, who also has this impulse to get them to repent and to make them, he's the one who says they're abominations and they should all be just willing to die.
He's definitely the mama's boy. I think
he is the mama's boy.
Latches onto her ideals, and which I like because a lot of like Kol, which he comes back to, and Klaus and everyone, they all can't stand their parents. So then you have Finn, who's like, hey, like, you're not that bad. Like, I like your thoughts.
Well, with Esther. He's not
with
quite
Esther,
that way with Michael.
Not with Michael, but which is understandable.
Michael just does not like his kids. Except for one. We'll get to that in a minute.
So, man.
Was Freya season 2? Or
Freya was season 2. Okay, well, just come out and say it, Jen.
I couldn't remember because I really liked her. Ended up liking her. I was a little confused in the beginning about how she felt towards the rest of the family because I think she was kind of against them, wasn't she?
Yes.
To start?
So to set up the listener. So first it starts with Esther, right? And then because the Michelsons are descended from her as witches, we also have Finn, who we get introduced to Vincent for the very first time because Vincent is his host for Finn.
He's so incredible. Oh my god.
And we're also introduced to Caleb, who is the host for Kol. Kol would be in our original 5, he would be the second to the youngest. He's the one older than Rebekah. It goes Finn, Elijah, Klaus, Kol, Rebekah. Right?
Okay.
Well, then we also learned that apparently Esther had trouble having children. And in order to make herself fertile, she sought the help of her older sister, whose name is Dahlia, and was played by the lady that was on Farscape and also Stargate, for those of you sci-fi fans. And
yeah, way over my head,
fine.
but okay.
That's for all you shout-outs, sci-fi. Anyway, Dahlia is a very powerful witch, possibly more powerful than Esther. And in order to make this happen, she wants to build this coven of her own. And to do that, Esther has to, in Rumpelstiltskin-like fashion, agree to supply each firstborn of every generation in the Michelson line and this was before she cast the vampire spell with the white oak, to have children. And so the first child, we find out she had a child before Finn, and that child is Freya, and that Dahlia came and accepted her price, which was Freya, and that she taught Freya to be a very powerful witch, but also in order to keep her alive over the course of generations would put her in slumber for like 100 years and then wake her up for a little while and then put her back to sleep.
So kind of like Rebekah, like going into the coffin for however long and then coming back out. That's
Exactly.
a bit of a parallel. Yeah.
The witch's equivalent of the stakes that Klaus was
Only
using.
maybe not quite as often.
Correct.
That poor Rebekah
Oh,
spent
I know.
steak so many
Klaus
times.
is such a brat. Anyway,
Sorry.
so she wakes up and we are introduced to her as all of these other Michaelsons are coming in. Not to mention the fact that Davina, in a quest to get back at Klaus, resurrects Michael, if you remember, during this season.
And she has the bracelet and the whole shebang.
Yes, is controlling him until such time as she can sick the mean dad on Klaus. So a lot is happening in this season. So Freya comes out, and at first I think she wants to be part of this family because this is her long-lost family. Like, oh my gosh, I have siblings and parents. But I think she soon learns how the family works. And then starts to ally with Finn. And of course, Finn is against the rest of his siblings. He agrees with his mother. He wants them all to not exist anymore. He thinks their existence is torment and torture. So let's talk about all of this. Freya.
The setup of Freya I really liked because not only did she have this background with Thalia and her being the firstborn and being like sacrificed sort of, but you have her the way that when Rebekah was in that house in a different body, which also comes in, and she's introduced through those like Scrabble pieces, I think. Like, I really like that for some reason. And I think that her having this, again, kind of like Rebekah in the sense that she has a really strong yearning to have a family and have a place as opposed to being like trained. I think that was well done.
It took Freya a while to grow on me. It felt a little too, like, we're introducing a new character.
You're like convenient a little bit.
Yeah, too convenient, yeah. Or maybe even for ratings, like, we have a long-lost sister. But I think these writers, some of which overlap with the Vampire Diaries, I think they are very good at navigating twists. And
yeah, I agree.
I like how she did sort of... We find out that she is Michael's favorite because she's the only one who, well, A, she was kidnapped and taken as a child by her aunt, and B, she's the only one who's not a vampire. She's a witch. She's become a very powerful witch like her mother and aunt. And so she has a place now. And I like how, especially in season 2, but also in season 3, they've kind of explored her and her relationships with each of her siblings. And I think Elijah and Rebekah become very accepting of her very quickly. They're suspicious, but accepting.
Which I think is very, like, habitual of their character. They're a bit more like, hey, I have to feel you out first, but once I do... and I think that's why their relationship is so strong as well. Yeah. Because they're similar in a lot of ways, so...
They are.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have Klaus's reaction to Freya, which is the opposite of that. He's just met with suspicion and hostility and defensiveness.
He's suspicious of everybody, I
He
feel.
really is.
But he's sort of...
With good reason. Sowed his own oats there.
He's been
and made his own
conditioned
bed.
to be almost in his... like childhood and that sort of thing, so...
It's true. What you come to find out is that all of the kids have suffered their fair share of abuses at the hands of each other and at the hands of their parents. Yeah. And Klaus, that's where, like someone pointed out earlier, that's where his sympathetic piece is obviously there's a root to all of his evil. It's just a question of whether the root means more to you or the evil means more to you, or to the characters they meet. But so Esther comes back, and this whole season is about how these different resurrected characters descend upon the ones who haven't died yet. Because let us not forget Caleb as Kol, who initially allies with Finn, even though Finn is the one who killed him, because he's trying to get back at Klaus. Okay?
Oh, Jesus.
Plus...
That makes my head hurt.
I know, right?
I love it, though. Like, it's great.
Plus, Kol as Caleb and Davina start this very Buffy Angel relationship.
Yeah, I like it, though.
I like it.
Love it.
It's actually pretty cute. And it gives Kol a purpose.
Yeah, it does.
Because I have to say that Kol up until that point was my least favorite of them.
Yeah.
Well, and the problem was in the Vampire Diaries, because Finn and Kol died, they were just kind of there. Like, you didn't really get a lot of substance to them. And so they come in and you kind of see Kol as like I think Klaus says it multiple times, like the mischievous, like rebellious child.
The lost middle child.
Yeah, he's like the black sheep almost a little bit in his own, like, I guess Klaus
I think
would be
Klaus
that,
is the
but, like,
black sheep.
I think they've actually said that.
Yeah. And because he's not the lost middle child, that actually bounced to Kol. You think Klaus would be the lost middle child because he's the bastard and the hybrid and everything else, but because he made such a ruckus throughout his whole life, it ended up being Kol.
Yeah, and plus Kol has this, like, he was a witch before he was a vampire, and he could experience that a lot, and so he also has this want to engage in that. I think he says that he liked the thrill of it, the power of it, so I think that's a cool, like, perspective of his character. And then just with Davina, like, it's just cute. It's cute.
It is cute.
I don't know.
And it gives her a purpose beyond I'm a harvest girl.
Yeah.
Because it's still a little teeny agey, but it has the Buffy and Angel motif because you've got the very old vampire with a very young girl, but they still look like they could be together. It's very interesting to me. But the whole season 2 was really about saving hope from Dahlia. That's the biggest motivation. But then also saving each other from the machinations of the parents. Because Esther's trying to kill him, and then once Davina releases Michael, he's trying to kill him. I mean, what kind of parents are these, really?
They need some classes or something like that.
So what did you think about any of that?
I liked it. I mean, I started out every time. I liked it. No, I didn't really care for Esther so much. Probably could have done without her character entirely.
She's just repetitive.
Well, and I
she
also
could have been
didn't
good
love
just
the actress who played the body jumper either.
But I could have just done in like flashbacks with her. Something that was fine.
Yeah.
But for her to come back
again.
But Michael, I really liked him. I really enjoyed his reign of terror.
I enjoy him too, and I think it's interesting setting Klaus up against Michael because he becomes kind of this scaredy cat around his dad.
But he does meet his biological father at one point, and then he murders him, unfortunately. But he did it to protect Hope because he knew about Hope I don't remember how he knew. His father knew about Hope, and that's why he killed him. But I'm just forgetting how he actually found out about Hope.
Michael?
No, Klaus's biological father.
Well, first of all, Esther brought him back from the dead,
yes,
too.
he did. Yeah, that's right.
Everybody was coming back
all
from the
about
dead.
that. That's right.
Yeah.
And so I think
it was in order to sort of show Klaus, like, hey, this is what you could have. Like, I think his father was indifferent. Like, you can be a vampire, you can be a wolf, but I mean, at the end of the day, that was his purpose, was to kind of show Klaus the light side of everything.
And then Klaus killed him.
He did.
Again.
But it was to protect Hope. Like, I mean, it's not good.
I don't think he killed his bio dad to protect Hope.
Yeah, because remember, he knew about her.
He knew about her, but I think Klaus was motivated to kill him because, if I recall this correctly, he was deeply within that kind of mood that Klaus gets in where everybody's against him, and he just didn't want yet another person to come against him.
I think that could be part of it as well, but I do remember he was, like, distraught, like, following that, because he rescued Elijah, because that was kind of the whole point of the meeting with him too, is he was trying to save him from their mother, and then
this is a very complicated season.
I'm sorry.
Season 2 might have been more complicated than Season 3, I think.
It really was. There was a lot of side stories, but I just remember his distraughtness was because he didn't want to. I mean, at first he thought his biological father was just sort of a game, like he wasn't actually there as a result of his mother's magic. But then once he realized, hey, you're actually alive again, his father tells him, I know your daughter is still alive and well. And so Klaus is then prompted to protect his daughter. So I think that's
I guess I didn't read it that way because I feel like for Klaus, the werewolf father was never as big a threat as Dahlia or Michael.
Yeah.
I think
or
it was,
Esther for that.
Yeah, I think it was always just a wanting to know that side of him, but then like he didn't really ever get it, so he became like
I think it was
a
more
frustration
of a sense,
towards it.
Well, maybe that frustration, yes, but
definitely
also
anger.
a lack of trust. And that I never read it as he was trying to protect Hope because I think it did alarm him that bio dad, whatever his name was, knew of Hope.
Yeah.
But I don't think he necessarily saw him as a threat to Hope.
Yeah.
Not any more than Esther or
That's
Dahlia, you know.
It could be both, I don't know.
But it also came at a moment when, and I think that's probably the key, where Rebekah was still trying to hide with Hope.
That's very true.
And if you recall, there was kind of that parallel story where Elijah had gone to go meet them, but Esther had unlocked kind of that repression center of his brain.
He like spazzed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we learned that he was in love with the very first betrothed doppelganger, whose name is Tatia.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm so tired of the doppelganger. Like, if I never see one again, I'll be fine.
Oh, sorry, Nina, if you're listening.
I love Nina, but, like, there's just so many. And, like, I know that's the point of them, but at the same time, it's like we had Catherine, we had the Silas, her name was, like, Amara, we have Elena herself. Like, it's time. Let it be over. So...
Well,
and
I
plus,
mean, that was just a flashback.
Yeah, but and it's so funny because then he fell in love with two betrothed doppelgangers, with Catherine and with Tatia. Like, what?
So did Damon and Stefan.
Oh, that's true. Oh my god.
It's a running theme, really.
It's a running theme. They're just very magnetic, these doppelgangers. And Tatia wasn't a vampire, not at first. In fact, that's what we learned, is that actually Klaus was kind of canoodling with Tatia, and Elijah kind of swooped in there and then killed her in his vampiric state after he shortly became vampire.
She was part of the spell, right?
I don't remember if she was in sacrifice to the spell. I do remember him biting her after turning into a vampire because he didn't want to tell Klaus. Because not only did he love her and had already done he then killed her.
Yeah,
and didn't want to tell Klaus.
Yeah, because I think I'm mixing up what he thought had happened and then the actual memory, because he thought that it was his mother that killed her, and then come to find out it was actually him, and he had just like deeply repressed that. So
she kind of helped him magically lock it away, and then in her flip-floppy fashion,
that's true,
kind of magically unlocked it. Because she's not a nice person.
She's not.
She was trying again the whole like repent for all the bad things you've done, but it's like you kind of caused it. Like you're the original. Like these guys are, but you're sort of the source of the magic. So
so that's when, as you said, Elijah spazzed. They sent Elijah out to go basically to find Rebekah and Hope, because at that point they had learned about Dahlia from Freya.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. And how Dahlia was coming for Hope. So there was kind of that swirl of stuff going on. I don't know. I don't mind the fact that they brought in the betrothed doppelganger again. I think that just reminds us that there are two parts of a universe.
That's true. It's all very, like, connected. That's
right.
True.
And you don't have the experience Jen and I have of watching Buffy and Angel.
I mean, I've seen Buffy as a result of my dad, but yeah, I've never actually sat down and watched it all the way through.
Right.
I watched it twice.
I've watched it more than that. It's one of my favorite shows.
It's one of mine. Mm-hmm.
But the fact that it's all part of a universe and that it all kind of just grows and expands. And so that's kind of how I took the betrothed doppelganger introduction into the originals. Just to remind you, this is the Vampire Diaries. And that's even furthered by the crossovers we get in Season 3, which we'll get to when we get to Season 3. What else did you think about Season 2? Rebekah also body jumped into ultimately a very disturbed young witch.
Which is how we sort of found Freya initially, because of those Scrabble pieces or whatever.
Yes. So, any other thoughts about that season?
Well, we had Hayley and Jackson.
Hayley and Jackson get married, and in fact, Klaus convinces her to do it because the werewolves are kind of left in disarray after their failed attempt to take over the city.
And I believe the sort of the reason for it is because of the magical unification ceremony, right? To make all of the werewolves so they don't have to turn on the full moon. Oh yeah, because initially they were like, they had those rings and
Yeah.
The crescent rings or whatever. Moon rings. I don't know.
The crescent rings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe the moon rings.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. So we had that piece too.
Yeah.
Was Vincent season 2?
Vincent was season 2 because he was Finn's host body initially.
That's right, yeah. But then he becomes his own person.
He's able to expel Finn's spirit.
Is that the end
somehow.
of season 2?
Near the end.
Near the end, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked him.
I
like the introduction of that character.
Yeah.
I do too. I think he, again, makes the witches part a little bit more grown up. No offense to the Davina part, but keeping it at the teen level kind of undermines it a little bit.
No, I agree.
Whereas pairing them together gave it more oomph and made her more adult in the process, I felt.
That's very true. Yeah. I think out of, and they actually said that at a Comic-Con panel, out of all of the characters, like, they all have the ways that they've grown, but I think Davina has really, like, from being like this scared girl in season 1 to where she is now, I think she's evolved the most, in my opinion anyway.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think her and possibly Marcel have had the biggest jumps in actual character development.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I think probably Elijah has stayed mostly the same, but for this whole unlocking of his repression, because after that, he becomes a lot more ruthless. He's a little less cool and calculating, although he still does his Niklaus thing with his finger, which I love it every time he says that. No Niklaus. He's the only one that calls him Niklaus, which I think is hilarious too. Like the stern older brother.
Yeah, which I like because he's always, I mean, he's the noble one. He wears suits and he's got a very, like, he's diplomatic personality. And then you have him now sort of almost resembling Klaus in a lot of ways with this, like, just frustration towards the things that have happened to him.
Or at least kind of meeting him more towards the middle as opposed to being such opposites. I would agree with that. And I think that's what helps them build their middle ground when they need it.
Yeah.
But as this season kind of dies away, since I'm feeling I can't remember anymore about season 2.
I keep remembering season 3 at this point.
We're getting there. So what happens here at the end is that they have to kind of all get rid of all of these come back to life characters, right?
Yes.
So first, of course, we lose Finn. Vincent is able to expel Finn, and Freya traps him in that blue pendant, which she then wears around her neck. Caleb dies. I believe Klaus kills Caleb, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Klaus goes on a couple rampages.
Which pisses Davina off major big time.
She hates him even more.
Yes.
She hated him before, but now she's like, you're gone. Like, I'm sorry.
Right. But she's hell-bent on bringing Kol back from the witch's spirit world or hell or wherever he's supposed to be.
The Veil, was it called?
The Veil, I think.
Because the other side collapsed. That was the whole, like...
On the Vampire Diaries.
Yeah, madness. And that sort of, in some ways, folded over into the show, but...
It did.
Yeah.
But instead of there not being an other side, there was this kind of weird bridge
like a limbo,
realm.
Yeah, it's like
limbo.
A purgatory kind of weird...
A little bit. But mostly witches land there. I don't think we meet anybody else.
I don't think there's any... Yeah, I think it's all witches.
I think a lot of that could be because the witches, they always talk about how their power is derived from, like, nature and that sort of thing. So maybe that's why they're sort of always in this, like, limbo state, is because when they need to come back and sort of have their say on a problem, they can.
Right.
So maybe that's why.
So that happens, and then Rebekah also, but she's still in this, she wants to stay in this body that she has, but she vows as a witch to try to help Davina bring back Kol, because she feels Kol got the raw end of the stick in that situation. Klaus, because he is now able to get a hold of Hope, and they get rid of Dahlia in a very dramatic fashion. There's this whole tussle because Hayley wants to take Hope and raise her with the wolves. And Klaus is like, you're not going to take my daughter, la 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 la. So he gets the wolves cursed so that instead of not turning at the full moon, they in fact are wolves all the time and only turn human at the full moon.
That's right.
So
that was a nice twist, though.
It was a good twist. I liked that, and I liked where they were going with that. And then at the same time, he also betrays Elijah, who's already pretty pissed off about this whole situation. And part of that has to do with the whole Hayley situation, because Elijah is deeply in love with her. Smoldering love with her.
I love it.
And so they are no more. They are unhappy, which I loved this whole season finale. It was great. I loved the whole season, honestly. I felt, okay, the originals is really finding its rhythm.
They really do a great job of, like, wrapping everything up, I think, in some ways. Yeah.
But then we get to season 3, which I have to say is my favorite season so far.
It's mine.
Everybody got shivers. So this is the random reunion season. That's what I'm going to call it. Because remember how I mentioned that there's 1,000 years of history and they could introduce something and it could seem like left field, but really it isn't, because there's 1,000 years of history that we're never going to know. Well, that's what season 3 was all about.
It's ingenious.
We learned about the original sires, which I think is a great new spin on vampire fiction. Love it. So we learn about, got to sort this out. I'm going to read what I wrote in the talking points, because it's just, there's so much to it.
Lot.
Listener, get ready. We meet Lucian, Tristan, and Aurora. The latter two are siblings from a noble family 1,000 years old. Lucian was their servant. When the Michelson siblings were first on the run from Michael after they turned vampire, they hid themselves with his family, but they were new vampires not aware of their full powers. Klaus befriended Lucian, but in an accident, sired him. Elijah sired Tristan much the same way. Aurora, who we come to learn suffered from mental illness, likely schizophrenia, was accidentally sired by Rebekah. They become what are known as the first sires. When Michael finds his children again, these three are compelled by their sire originals to believe that they were the sire originals. So Lucian believed he was Klaus, and Tristan believed he was Elijah, and Aurora believed she was Rebekah, so that they would run and lure Michael away from the actual original siblings, who then ran the other way, which caused these three sires all to seek vendettas because they were compelled by the originals. So eventually that wore off, and they remembered, and they all wanted to seek revenge against their sires. The problem is they can't kill them, because as we know from the Vampire Diaries, you kill an original vampire, every sire down their line dies with them.
Which is also Davina's whole thing about saving Josh and that kind of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we know that Finn's sire line, not that there was much of one, died, and we learned that Kol's sire line died. But not only is that happening, these three also conjure up a war between the sire lines, because Tristan heads this society called the Strix, which we found out was actually started by Elijah amongst his sires to be like a refined sort of executive level vampire secret society.
That reminds me of Supernatural, because they have hunters, and then they have the men of letters.
Yeah, it's kind of like the vampire men of letters in a way.
Yeah.
Only they're way more evil.
It's like Elijah's it's backup plan.
His posse.
Yeah.
Miss my clip.
Yeah.
Well, then,
but it's secret.
Secret society, correct.
Yes.
And then we've got Lucian, who's been nursing this long-held crush. Oh, Tristan and Aurora are siblings, right? Lucian's nursed this long-held crush on Aurora, but Aurora and Klaus were in a relationship.
Yeah.
And then Klaus went away because she was compelled to be Rebekah.
Yeah.
And she thought, because Elijah basically is the one who told her, Klaus doesn't love you anymore. And Klaus thought Aurora abandoned him before she was compelled. It's all very soap opera.
It's all very confusing, but...
So they all come back, and they start wreaking havoc on New Orleans.
Well, I mean, I would too. I don't blame them.
I'd be pissed to find out that really wasn't Rebekah.
Right? So what did we think about season 3?
I thought that was a great storyline to just throw in there. I just thought it just opened up a whole...
It's kind of ingenious.
Different line of
it is
storytelling.
ingenious.
You can do
A++ writers.
10 out of 10. But, I mean, I think, again, you can do so much with that. And that's kind of another theme of the show. Like you said, You have 1,000 years. Like, that's a millennium of history. And saying so to bring in these sires, you wouldn't even think of that. Like, watching the show, I never even thought, hey, there would have been a first sire. I just kind of thought, oh, it just sort of happened. So to have that is like, wow. Like, it's great.
It was,
like
to me, it was amazing. You're right. It added so much story possibility. And the fact that there was this long, long, long line of vampires. Now, and we find out Klaus's line doesn't like him very much. Klaus's line, by the way, also
they
includes...
all want to kill him if they
right.
If they wouldn't have to die in their house.
Klaus's line ultimately includes basically all the characters on the Vampire Diaries. All the vampires on the Vampire Diaries are Klaus's.
Yep. That's why he can, like, never go, because then you just won't have
He
them.
can't. They're guaranteed their future. Whereas Elijah has created these Strix, and these Strix, man, they ain't playing around.
No.
And there's this chick called Aya, who I do not like very much, by the way, but Elijah was all, like, in love with her at one time, and then he abandoned her, and then she had this whole, you abandoned me complex.
You know what I love? Oh my god, I just thought of this. Okay, so he's like this noble guy, and you would think he'd be the one to have sort of a steady relationship, but then he has like all of these really broken...
He's a serial
dater.
Like much more than Klaus.
Like, really? Like, that's interesting. I like that.
I think it's because Elijah's internal struggle, as you noted, is that he really wants to be noble, but that's not his nature.
No,
he's a vampire. He can't really be noble. Eventually, he has to cross that line either to put his brother in check or to put himself in check or to put any of his family in check. And so he ends up doing things that he doesn't really want to do. And hates himself for it as much as he hates anybody else.
And thus projects it onto his relationships.
Correct.
Wow.
That's why it's Shakespearean in nature.
It's also, like, we're like Cammy. We're just psychologically breaking him down.
Yeah, but she's really only working on Klaus.
That's true.
Yeah.
Which we find out in this season that she's been doing this psychology master's program and that Klaus is her first patient. What do we think about that?
That's like so normal and like conventional, but it's not at the same time. Like, he's the original vampire. Like, that's crazy.
I would be scared to listen to what he has to say.
I'd be like, wow,
And she wasn't, was she? Like,
No,
she
she never was.
I would definitely be kind of terrified.
Which I love. And I think that's why Klaus loves her so much. And really, from season 1, like the first time he saw her, he was like, again, the token human wholesomeness, but at the same time, she's not afraid to look at Klaus and be like, hey, I see your evilness, but you also have humanness, and you can fix that. Like, you're not a lost cause kind of thing. And I think that's why
she believes he can be redeemed.
Yes.
Just like Elijah believes he can be redeemed.
And I think that's why, I mean, with Elijah, there's just a lot of, like, brotherly tension, which is why he doesn't always take to what he has to say. But with Cammy, because she's Cammy, he's like, wow, you're kind of right, but, like, not. Like, he sort of goes back and forth, again, with the flip-flopping, like, yeah, I deserve, like, a paradise or a place where I can be happy, but at the same time, I've done all of these really horrible, awful things.
So, in this season, this is kind of a good segue, too, because this is where this all begins. So we get some serial killings going on, because these vampires come to town, and they bring the rest of the sires along with them. So it's descending upon New Orleans. They start to get an uptick in vampire-type related murders. And they all, the Michelsons find out that their progeny, their vampire progeny, have all descended into town. And so the very first thing we get is this reunion with Klaus and Aurora, and this complicated, like, do I still love you? Do you still love me? Kind of a thing. And that's how we learn about how Elijah basically told her Klaus doesn't love you anymore, and then P.S. I'm going to compel you to be Rebekah. So
I kind of thought that was mean.
Elijah wasn't always very nice guy.
I know he wasn't.
So she tries to rekindle this flame with Klaus, but as Allie has described just a moment ago, Klaus has an undying affection for Cammy, which really comes to the forefront in this season. Like, their smoldering sexual tension starts to boil. And Aurora sees it.
Yep. She's like, oh no, that's my man.
She
Pretty much.
She goes Jerry Springer vampire style on us. And what does she do? Well, after we get this lovely love scene where they finally consummate their budding relationship, Klaus wakes up with a quote-unquote dead Cammy, who then, of course, becomes a vampire. Now, she's a reluctant one. She doesn't want to make the transition.
Oh, man. She's
until Vincent
so much.
talks her into it. So what do we think about Cammy? Because you already mentioned she was like the Matt Donovan. Not true.
Mind blown.
So what do we think about, and you kind of hinted at earlier, like Cammy started off good and...
Yeah, this is the point where I didn't like her.
So tell us about that, Jen.
Well, it's just like in the Vampire Diaries, the whole when Elena was human, I kept thinking, oh, it'd be cool if she became a vampire. And when she did become a vampire, I loved it with her. But Cammy, I was starting to think that, oh, that'd be cool if she became a vampire. And when she did, I hated it. I just didn't like that, how she became, like, kind of evil. I guess I wanted that wholesome, pure Cammy human back, but she went the exact opposite route.
Well, it's kind of referring back to what Allie said earlier about them kind of being a parallel to Damon and Elena. We basically got the Elena track all over again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's funny that you say that, because in the Vampire Diaries, like, I loved Elena when she was human. When she became a vampire, I was like, it was predictable. Like, you knew it was going to happen eventually. And, I mean, the way that it happened was like, oh, she's a vampire now. Like, I liked the actual process of it, but then once it came to developing a storyline for her as a vampire, I was like, it's just not so much my thing. So, but I agree. It's just sad that they kind of went away with her pureness, Cammy's. So, yeah.
So the big push in this season for the Sires and their war is to try to incapacitate the originals. And they want to try to do it magically with this Seratura thing, but they turn heads on Tristan and trap him with it instead for a time. So that's Elijah's first sire. And he's in this boxcar, which then pisses off Aurora, because Aurora and Tristan are like siblings for the ages. And so she's going to enact this revenge, and one of the big revenge things she does, everybody's after the last bit of the white oak, which we know was burned and is the only thing that can kill the originals. Well, we discover, another discovery, that the chess piece that Klaus made for Rebekah when she was a child was whittled from white oak.
I loved that.
I did too.
Good continuity.
Yes,
writers.
like continuity, good. I could just live for it for days. It's great. Because so many shows just throw away with their continuity and they bring in new things when they could easily go back. And this one definitely does a really great job of just connecting all of it.
It does. So, and I loved that as well.
Yeah.
So Lucian's trying to get it for his own purpose. Aurora wants it, and she gets it first and whittles it down to bullets, which she then wants to use on both Klaus and Elijah in retaliation for all the mean and horrible things they did to her brother and herself. And so one of these situations eventually hits Cammy. And Cammy, unfortunately, is no more. Spoiler!
Which was, yeah.
Cammy has died on the Vampire Diaries. She was woodenly hit in the heart and
now, was
desiccated.
is the actress actually gone, or I'm wondering if they're going to bring her back?
I don't know. But as far as we know, she's not
gone, right.
Like the latter half of that second half of the season. So I think Cammy's gone. What do you think?
I think I'm really sad about it. Even though I didn't like her after being a vampire, I still thought she added stuff to the story, but...
She did, and it would have been interesting to see how Klaus and her navigated the two of them.
Yeah, because...
beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, Klaus's whole reason, like we said before, for really loving her was because she was what she was. She was human, again, the goodness, the light to his dark kind of thing, and then she was a vampire. And so I think... Yeah, exploring that more would have been really interesting. I'll get to my feelings more on that when we get to Davina.
Okay, so let's segue there. So, and I'm going to talk about Lucian's big plot in a moment. But in the meantime, Davina, she is wooed by the Strix. So she spends the whole time of season 3 trying to get Kol out of the veil, right? She wants him back. She loves him. He's the love of her life. He calls her Davina Claire. Anyway, so the Strix woo her because at their disposal, once Tristan is trapped, Aya sort of takes over. which is all very complicated because she's a very angry person and she really doesn't like Elijah very much because he left her, right? So at their disposal they have this coven of witches, which we find out are basically outcast witches that she's kind of gathered to her for her own uses and manipulates them to doing things for the Strix. And she does the same thing for Davina, because parallel to all this stuff, first Marcel and Vincent tried to put Davina as regent of the witches, which is kind of like the head of all the covens.
Yeah.
But when she mishandled a threat to her within the covens, somebody who tried to kill her, she then retaliated and killed back on the advice of one of those two. I don't remember who it was. Then all of a sudden she was in danger, so they machinated to get her away so she'd be safe, and then Vincent became regent, which has its own complications. And then the Strix wooed Davina, and Davina agreed. Now, she fully knew what she was getting into, but she thought she could use her power to resurrect Kol, which she does. But part of the resurrection comes from the fact that they actually had to start the spell to get the Sire Lines eradicated from Klaus and Elijah. And this actually segues into our first crossover of the season. Stefan Salvatore, played by Paul Wesley, comes on over from Mystic Falls.
Just a hop over
because he's on the run from Reyna, if you listen to our Season 7 Vampire Diaries podcast. And of course he's also in Klaus's Sire Line, so he kind of gets drawn into this whole thing and agrees to help them.
And he does have a long history with the Michelson family, with Rebekah.
He does.
Especially.
He used to be a paramour of Rebekah's, or vice versa. So they get this all going, and they kind of serve as a distraction, which ends up saving Elijah from the spell, but Klaus's Sire Line is broken, which is very important. But in that process, brings back Kol. But the problem of bringing back Kol is that Kol is cursed. And he's cursed to want to... First of all, he's brought back as a vampire, not a witch. He's brought back to the state he was. And they are in love, and everything is peachy keen, but the curse is that he wants to bite the person who brought him back the most.
So he wants to eat Davina.
He wants to eat Davina.
Like, what kind of Romeo and Juliet madness? Like, it's...
Vampire style.
Really.
And Kol succeeds. And Davina also expires and passes away. So, Allie, how do you feel about the deaths on the originals in Season 3?
Here's the thing.
Let's lay it down.
Hear me out. In 2016 specifically, just like a lot of really great female characters, especially, this is like a rant, but have been killed off of shows. And it's so frustrating. And then you have these really great characters like Davina, like Cammy, who have a lot of potential, and they've been strong since day one. And then they just kind of... And it's only usually to further the storylines of their male counterparts, which again is kind of ranty, but like... it makes me sad. Like, Davina was a great character, and so is Cammy, and...
Maybe they'll come back as body jumpers. I don't know how. But
maybe. I'm sure that
I don't know, because the last scene we saw was Davina kind of fading into the mist.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're going to see her again. Yeah. And then I also wonder, does that mean, because now Kol is back. You know, Finn has actually died again. We'll get to that in a second, but Kol is back. Oh, yeah, by the way, when Kol came back, Finn hitched a ride and he became back alive. I forgot to mention that, by the original actor. So I'm wondering if Nathaniel Bukovic, or whatever his name is, who plays Kol, is going to become a series regular.
That would be interesting. I would love to see that. I just would really love Davina to come back, and Cammy as well. I mean, for Davina, I suppose there would still be ways they could flash back, maybe have Kol, I don't know, like have some sort of dream of her or something, whatever. But it's just a real bummer.
I just still feel like there's a way for her to Davina to come back, because didn't the veil drop or whatever go away? Like the witch's world is now, they don't need a regent. They don't need,
because Vincent cast that spell.
Yeah, so maybe there's a way that she'll come. There's no more rules on that side, so.
Well, I mean, if Esther can keep coming back, and Kol can keep coming back, and Finn can keep coming back, probably Michael too. I can't see why they wouldn't bring anybody back.
Yeah.
But to me...
They'll find a way. if they want to.
Yeah, if they want to. I don't know if they're going to be back as regulars, though.
That's right, they might not.
I agree.
They might introduce newer characters, because, I mean...
Which is why I'm hoping Kol becomes a regular, because that would be great to have.
Well, he has a lot of backstory that we haven't really seen. Like, we've seen some of it here and there, but... Yeah. And I like Davina's, like, regency, because I think it really paralleled, again, like, the show has a lot of parallels to, like, Hayley being, like, the queen, sort of, the Crescent Wolves, and then you have Klaus and Marcel, who are sort of head honchos of the vampires.
So then, now parallel to all of this, we have Lucien. Now, Lucien's big plan in all of this is to grab a hold of the White Oak, not necessarily to kill any of the Michaelsons, because that would kill all the vampires. He wants to become just like the Michaelsons. Now,
become an original.
Now, the thing is, he has this witch who can foretell prophecy, and that's another thing, a theme of this season, is that she has this prophecy that the Michaelsons will all fall due to a friend, family, and a foe, right? Or some combination of that. So throughout all this time with the Sire Warrior trying to figure out who could that be referring to, Lucien manages to get a hold of the last White Oak bullet. He has kidnapped members of all the 7 packs of werewolves to put them in a lab and extracted their venom. And then he's also got Freya basically strong arms her into recreating Esther's original spell to turn him into some sort of super vampire hybrid situation, which he then wants to turn around and use to kill Klaus, or kill, not Klaus, but anybody who's not Klaus, because Klaus is his sire. So we have all that. We also have another crossover, because they have to go to Mystic Falls to do it, because that's where the White Oak was, and Matt Donovan comes in, and he's like, Elijah Michelson, and he says, Matthew Donovan. There's that whole thing, and you're like, why is Matt here? He's just gonna get hit. Bring somebody else. Where's Damon? Anyway, nevertheless, this happens, and he turns into the super vampire hybrid, but he creates an extra vial of the stuff, this blood, that turned him into the super vampire hybrid. Let's talk about that quickly.
Which is meant to be for Aurora, isn't it?
It's meant to be for Aurora, because he loves Aurora.
Ends up.
And Aurora's like, I don't like you. Actually, she tells somebody else that, and it's shown to him on video.
Yeah.
And then he traps her again, because Klaus trapped her the first time. What do we think about this whole situation?
I liked it. I don't like how it ends up.
Well, which part are you saying ends up? Are you talking about
Marcellus?
Okay. See, I didn't say that part. Yeah.
I should just say that when it. So yeah, I'm disappointed in his choice. What he chooses to do,
which is
take the venom and become the
super vampire hybrid.
Yeah,
and the beast. He is the beast.
He is the beast, but he hates Klaus that much. Well, and Elijah, but more so Klaus, even though it was Elijah, wasn't it, that kind of, killed him and sealed everything, whatever. But, yeah.
Again, I just love that, because, like I said before, you see the fall of what they once had, them sitting and raiding Shakespeare and, sword fighting and that kind of thing, and now you have them to where they are. And I think it's just really interesting.
I guess I didn't like it because it left the Michelson family very fractured. Or fractured. Fractured. It's kind of split apart a little bit. I just think that Marcellus should have been more loyal to Klaus, even though Klaus did some terrible things towards him.
I agree with that.
Well, still, that's kind of the interesting part about Marcel. So what they flesh out in this season, we learned way back when that he was kind of like a son to Klaus, and a nephew to Elijah. I think Elijah served as kind of his doting uncle figure to him.
Yeah.
In this season, though, Klaus and Elijah are kind of jockeying with Marcel the whole time. The Strix woo Marcel, even though Marcel is a Klaus sire, and the Stricks are Elijah's sires. They try to get him in because he's a very powerful figure. He's sort of come of his own. He's the master that's outdone the apprentice. And Klaus is still kind of treating him. It's kind of that, treating him still like a child scenario.
Yeah,
that is true.
Which they
Which
do
then
a lot
Elijah,
with Rebekah as well. So I think,
they did that. And so as they're kind of jockeying with him and using him to his own ends, he's like, okay, that's great, but where do I fit in with your family? And that becomes the supporting character's refrain. Like, if it's the family, none of us matter.
Well, yeah.
We're important to you until it's the nucleus of you.
Which
and that's what he calls them out on the bridge.
Yeah.
So we find out, and he ends up taking it because he's had it. He ends up taking up the cause that Lucian fails at, because Lucian does end up dying. They end up getting rid of him.
And I think Kol even points that out a lot in season 2 and throughout, that the core of that whole family has always been Klaus, Elijah, and then Rebekah. And aside from that, they're just sort of there. And so I think Marcel kind of always felt like he really wanted a place at the table. And so when he's betrayed constantly by Klaus, I think that's where his...
And Elijah. I think you gotta add Elijah to it too.
No, I think, and Rebekah even in some ways.
Yes, but less so. I think Rebekah kind of does respect Marcel because they do love each other very, very deeply.
Yeah.
I think Klaus dopes but betrays, and I think Elijah uses Marcel when it's convenient for him.
No, I completely agree.
Especially in the 3rd season, because Elijah's scruples are not as noble as they once were.
Yeah, he's got a little problem.
He's got an edge now that door's been unlocked.
Yeah.
So I actually love the parallel that it sets up, because Marcel has basically become the new Klaus in this scenario.
Yeah, wow.
And the way that it ends is that the hybrids, that he ends up biting both Elijah and Kol, and of course Klaus's bite, the super hybrid bite, kills them now. It doesn't just, turn them into a werewolf, because he's got the werewolf venom going. It's not just the white oak anymore. Yeah. So they're going to die, so they get staked and put into slumber, right? Mm-hmm. Klaus is put on trial in front of all of his sires, and Rebekah is his defender, and Marcel's the king of the court.
Because she's got that, was that curse or something?
She's got the curse from, what was that from? Dahlia, I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. That skull thing, whatever, on her, that slowly makes her go
crazy. And vampire, badass person. And so she starts to have that happen, so they stake her. And so then Klaus, in sacrifice to his family, agrees to be, that, I don't know what that stake is made out of, or the knife, the one that actually incapacitates him without killing him. Yeah. And that's where the season ends. The one that leaves him in perpetual torment.
But then now we're jumping forward, aren't we?
Are we?
Yeah.
There's a time jump?
They're time jumping.
How do you know that?
Because I watched panels. They're time jumping.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, they're time jumping 7 years. So
oh my god.
We just did this on the Vampire Diaries.
For real. Not by that long, though.
No, it might be better by that long.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, I believe when I watched their San Diego Comic-Con panel or whatever, they're time jumping 7 years. So now Hope will be also a figure.
So Hope's going to become...
Yeah, and I think Julie Plack actually talked about, because she was like, how much can we do with a child? And she watched some movies, I think, where Drew Barrymore or something was a child. I don't remember the name of it. But yeah, she was like, well,
Firestarter.
Yeah, Firestarter. Yeah, that's what it was. And she was like, I watched that, and I was like, wow, there's things we can do with her. So it'll be really interesting to see her component and what...
Because lest we forget, Hayley drove off with her into the sunset.
I was thinking that Hope would somehow be the one that kind of saves Elijah from dying from the bite.
Maybe Hope will save all of them.
We'll kind of see what her superpowers are and where she stands in the family and that sort of thing. So I think,
So are these some predictions? Yeah. Hope's going to save the family?
Obviously
they have to wake up or we have no show, so that's an easy one.
Hope is the hope, I think.
I'm predicting Kol will be a regular. I hope he'll be a regular.
I agree. Hopefully we'll see some of Davina and Cammy, but I'm not really confident. I just really hope so.
Well, we'll find out. We'll have to find out, won't we? Are we going to watch season 4?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Do you recommend this show to others?
Absolutely.
I do.
Because
It's awesome.
Man, if you love vampires and some crazy faction madness, then just go for it. It's a little complex, but
better or worse than the Vampire Diaries?
Better.
I think it's better.
100%
better.
better.
It's
I agree with everything you're saying. That's why I'm not talking. All of this! With everything said about the originals, I'd like to thank Jen and Allie for joining me for our very first originals panel at Couch Potatoes Unite.
No problem.
We have several more new episodes coming down the pike at couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com. And on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest, make sure you follow us. We're, of course, available by all those different feeds at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio. We're available anywhere you want to find us. Just look for us. We're easily searchable. If you like the originals, make sure that you tune into the CW and then follow us. Until that time, keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned. Bye-bye.